Hello viewers, this is Angela Murjani from Kasturba Gandhi College in Sikandrabad, and I welcome you today to this third and final episode on Henry Ford, the man who set the world on wheels. I trust that you've shut out every distraction and that you've kept your mind wide open, because I wouldn't want you to miss a single point from the amazing life of this amazing man. It's obvious we live in an age of great excess and abundance in several areas of our lives today. There is infinite knowledge available to us at our fingertips. TV boasts of hundreds of channels for our entertainment. Technological developments are outdating our gadgets and our appliances faster than we can cope. Never before heard of foods are invading our taste buds on a daily basis. In fact, one ice cream company boasts that it has 72 flavors to offer its customers. Surely, we are a generation spoiled for choice. However, there is one area in which we are experiencing a severe shortage, and that is the area of good leadership. It is extremely challenging for young people who are living in the world today to live for one reason, and that is the dearth of role models. Whether it is in the field of business, sports, politics or entertainment, you would hesitate to tell our young people to look at any one individual and follow their lives, because you never know what time will uncover in their future that would embarrass you terribly. So there is great benefit in looking back to the life of Henry Ford and considering the composition of this man's life, looking into his life to see what made it such an amazing and fruitful life. And if there is any good thing that we can learn from him, then it would be foolish not to. In today's lesson, we are going to unpack the story of this very inspiring life, and we are going to hunt for nuggets of wisdom that will enrich our lives as we try to emulate them. So what were the secrets? What were the keys that helped Ford to achieve such phenomenal success in his life? Let's consider them one by one. Let's talk first of all about Ford's vision. All great men begin their journey of significance with a vision, a deep and abiding commitment to a cause that they passionately believe in. In Ford's case, he truly believed that it was going to be possible for him to build a vehicle that would be both safe and affordable. From the very moment that he left his home in Dearborn and headed towards Detroit, there was no stopping him. All the rivals who came together in the trust, the rival automobile manufacturers headed by George Selden, the man who held the patent for petrol-driven cars, could not stop him. No financial crunch could deter him. Even when his financial backers left him without any support, Ford knew that the vision that was driving him on would take him through to the end. He truly believed that he would make this impossible dream a possibility and nothing would stand in his way. Even when circumstances were at their bleakest, he absolutely drove out all the distractions and kept in his view just that one focus of what he believed that he was born to do, to create that vehicle which would transport the people of his nation in ease and comfort at an affordable price. Ford's son Edsel was quite taken up with the idea of flight. Like every youngster around him who had heard the story of the Wright brothers, George and Orville, he also wanted to build and experiment with a flying machine of his own. But Ford discouraged him from diverting attention from the one thing which the family was totally focused on, and that was developing the petrol-driven vehicle. Developments in the petrol-driven car were happening on a daily basis, and Ford did not want his engineers and other people to be distracted even for one moment from what was their number one project. And so, Edsel bowed down to his father's desires, and all energy was once more rediverted towards the car. Not even in the face of imminent disaster and failure did Ford ever think that shutting down his venture was an option. When the people who supported him financially withdrew their support, not even when there were cases piling up against him in the court, did he ever feel that he was on the wrong track. He just kept on pushing through to what he believed was his dream and his vision. His conviction of success was so strong that even when discouragement did sometimes set in, his determination soon threw it out, and once more he was on track. Likewise, there are many things happening in the world around us, and several of them may fascinate us and call for our attention. But the truth is that we cannot do them all. There comes a time when we have to focus our energies on just one thing. And when we so concentrate on that one thing, the dividends do certainly pay off in the end. Success always comes to those who single-mindedly apply themselves to the thing that they are passionate about. Ford was so passionate about developing this petrol-driven car, an affordable car, a reliable car, that within 15 years of having his first Model T roll out of the assembly line, more than 50% of the cars on US roads were all Model Ts. The second key to Ford's success was the motivation that propelled him. At the beginning of the 20th century, most automobiles were playthings of the rich. They were complicated mechanisms that needed a chauffeur who was a kind of a driver cum mechanic who could understand the mechanism of the car and drive it as well as repair it if such a need arose. However, Henry Ford's determination was that he would not build a car for the rich. His aim was to build an affordable, viable model for the average American person. Ford's thinking was that the guys who were building the cars ought to be able to afford to buy one so that they could take their families out with them for a spin on a Sunday afternoon. It was out of such selfless thinking that came the Model T as well as the assembly line, two innovations that revolutionized American society and the world in which we live. Henry Ford did not invent the car, as we learnt in our previous lessons. All he did was develop a model that was perfectly within the economic reach of the average American. While other manufacturers were content to target a market of the well-to-do, Ford developed a design and a method of manufacture that steadily reduced the cost of the Model T. Instead of pocketing the profits, Ford lowered the price of his car. As a result, Ford Motors sold more cars, transforming the automobile from a luxury toy to a mainstay of American society. The Model Ts were hailed as America's everyman's car, elegant in the simplicity of its design and the ultimate dream machine for everyone who was concerned. The engineers, the people in the marketing sector, as well as the owners of the Model Ts themselves. It sold for the very affordable price of $825. Over 10,000 were sold in the first year itself, establishing a new record. 4 years later, the price dropped to $575 and sales were soaring. By 1914, Ford could claim a 48% share of the automobile market. To Henry Ford and him alone goes the credit for experimentation and development of a car that anyone could buy, anyone could drive to anywhere, and almost anyone could keep in a condition of good repair. The Model T ushered in the modern transport age, and with it came a whole series of developments in the field of mechanization, which are today known as automation. Ford also worked on making sure that an automotive infrastructure developed along with the cars. Like horses, cars need to be fed. And so Ford made sure that petrol stations or gas stations, as they are known in the United States, were set up all over the country. And soon as his tin Lizzies were bumping up and down on the rutted roads of an era of horse-drawn carriages, he began to lobby that better roads be built for his cars. And that culminated in the development of the interstate highway, which is the pride of the United States and still the envy of many nations of the world. Are you tired of hearing about people making the fast buck? Are you fed up when you hear of get-rich schemes that went wrong? Does it sicken you when you read the papers and scam after shameful scam hits the headlines, and you wish that there was something that you could do, but you have no idea what that might be? Well, the good news is there is something you can do. If you can find an interest that's outside of yourself and pursue it through with determination, you can make a difference to this world. Henry Ford had nothing when he began. All he had was a dream. He did not even have the money or the expertise to see it through. Yet, he had the determination to change the travel experiences of the people of his nation. If you have a dream, just go for it and you can make a difference to this world in which you live. Another important key to Ford's success was the introduction to and the development of the assembly line. Now, the development of the assembly line was essential to Ford's dream of building an affordable car because it was the assembly line which brought down the costs of production and increased efficiency in manufacture. The assembly line was not conceived of by Ford. However, he did perfect it, and he was definitely the first person to make use of it in the automobile industry. Now, prior to the introduction of the assembly line, cars were assembled individually by craftsmen who were very skilled, but this was a slow and expensive process. The introduction of the assembly line completely reversed the process. Instead of workers going to the cars, now the cars came to the workers, and the workers performed the same function over and over again. A conveyor belt moved the parts that were to be assembled along a line of 30 men at the speed of 5 feet per minute. Each worker had only 1 or 2 simple operations to perform, and the tools were all laid out beside him in a most practical and time-saving way. The result? Assembly time was reduced by more than half, whereas prior to the conveyor belt, it used to take 12.5 hours to assemble a Model T. Now production time came down to less than 6 hours. With Ford's mechanized plants, a new era in the history of the Industrial Revolution had surely begun. Mass production via the assembly line is generally considered to be the thing which initiated the modern consumer culture because it brought down the unit cost to the lowest level possible. It is often said that Ford's method of production was ingenious because he successfully turned his employers into customers. What he saw was a huge potential market inherent in his very employees. When the price of the automobile fell and he raised the wages of his workers, it became possible for them to buy cars. The more cars they bought, the more production costs came down and it was more affordable for them. And so this started a whole process of growth for Ford Motors, which is what made Ford famous and also made him to be set up as an example for industrialists all over the world. The third key to Ford's success has to be the way that he treated his employees. Ford greatly valued his employees, and he demonstrated this in a practical fashion by raising their wages and paying them higher than any other company according to the standards of the time. As a result of this, Ford was able to get workers from all around that region to work for the Ford Motor Company. He created a sensation by reducing the working hours from 9 hours to 8 hours a day, at the same time doubling their wages. He made $5 a day the minimum wage, and not only that, he began to share the profits of his company with his workers. Ford had touched upon a very important human need. More than high salaries, what people really desire is to work in an environment where they are valued and where they feel like they are an integral part of an organization. And this is what Ford understood from the very core of his being and demonstrated it practically in his actions towards his workers. Central to Ford's philosophy was his belief that every man should be able to make enough money to own a home, a piece of land, and a car. We believe in making 20,000 men prosperous and contented rather than follow the plan of making a few slave drivers in our establishment multimillionaires, Ford was quoted as saying in the La Crosse Tribune on January 6, 1914. He instituted the Ford Sociological Department in his factory, which was a group that visited the homes of workers to see if the conditions that they were living in were decent enough. Ford firmly believed that if workers were happy at home, they would definitely be more productive when they were at work. In order to be able to earn a share in the profits, workers had to show themselves to be sober, steady, industrious and saving, and that the extra money that they were earning would not be frittered away in riotous living. Needless to say, Ford's methods received a whole range of responses. The workers just loved him, and more people clamored to join Ford Motors, more than Ford could possibly employ. But the business people hated him. They went so far as to accuse him in the Wall Street Journal of being immoral. But Ford disregarded his critics, and he understood the value of the human element even in the midst of mass production. Time went on to prove his critics wrong and to prove Ford himself to be correct, because he believed that in keeping his workers happy, he would retain them and thereby he would cut production costs. Company profits doubled from $30 million to $60 million between 1914 and 1916. Ford is said to have famously remarked, "The payment of $5 a day for an 8-hour day was one of the finest cost-cutting moves we ever made." Ford's desire to share the profits of his company even with his customers was a truly selfless move. Every time his sales increased, he kept bringing the price of his cars down until eventually the Ford sold for an all-time low of $490. Ford had declared that he wanted to raise the standard of living of the American nation, and there is no doubt that he contributed to this appreciably himself. As employees of other companies heard about the perks that Ford Motors was giving their employees, they also began to demand the same from their employers. And very soon, a revolution was taking place all across America. As wages were raised, people were buying their own homes, their own cars, and very soon the dream which Ford had nurtured for his countrymen that everyone should afford a home and a car was coming to pass. Another vital key to Henry Ford's success would have to be the value that he placed on little things. A story is told of how once, after the death of his son Edsel, Henry Ford began to groom his grandson, Henry Ford II, to become the inheritor of the vast Ford estate, and he did this by training him to value the small things. On one occasion, when he was going for a walk with his little grandson, little Henry dropped something. His grandfather noticed and asked him what it was that had fallen. Little Henry replied rather nonchalantly that it was only a penny, which is a small coin of a very low denomination. Immediately, Henry Ford got down on his knees and began to search through the grass until he found the coin. What was this man trying to teach his little grandson? Was it a lesson in miserliness? Oh, never! What he wanted to say to his little grandson was that Sometimes things do not appear to be the way that they are. Things may appear to be of very little consequence, unimportant and insignificant, but their value might be far greater than it appears. He went on to explain to his little grandson, the future inheritor of the huge Ford empire, that if he were ever stranded on an island, this penny would serve him much more than paper money because it was made of metal, and perhaps he could use it to shape a tool or some other instrument that would help him to survive or even to escape. In this day and age of abundance and plenty, when very little value is applied to things that are apparently small, we would do well to listen to the voice of wisdom that is coming down through the decades to us, the voice of Henry Ford. It has been said, and very wisely, that if we take care of the little things, then the big things will take care of themselves. Yet another key to Ford's success could possibly be found in the friendships that he established. Ford was a good friend of Thomas Edison, the legendary inventor of the light bulb, the phonograph, the moving picture camera, and the owner of more than 1,000 other patents. From the time of their first meeting, when Edison questioned Ford about the mechanism of the petrol-driven car that he was planning to develop, Edison let Ford know that he had his complete approval. This went to a great length in encouraging Ford and helping him to know that he was on the right track. An old proverb says, "Iron sharpens iron." The two shared lengthy discussions in which they talked about the discoveries that they were working on. And later on, as Ford became a very successful businessman, he went on to sponsor a lot of the research that Edison was involved in. Later, Ford requested Edison to gift him his famous laboratory in which so many inventions had been made. And then, when Edison agreed, he dismantled the laboratory and then set it up again in his hometown of Dearborn. He then went on to assemble a museum around it, and in that museum we have a capsule of the American culture and lifestyle. Even today it is a popular tourist destination and thousands of people visit it to get a glimpse of what life was like in the 1900s. The friends we share our lives with deeply impact our thoughts and our actions. And so it becomes significant that we think carefully about whom we spend a great deal of time with. It is really important that the friends that we share our lives with do not drain us out but contribute positively to our lives. Now just think for a moment. Have you been spending a lot of time in the company of somebody who's making you feel depressed, negative, and hopeless? Then perhaps it's time for you to refresh your friend circle and bring in someone who's more enthusiastic and emits a positive energy that will help you to make the contribution to this world which you are meant to do. Although there are many factors that have contributed towards Ford's phenomenal success, I believe that the main one rests in his selfless motivation. He never sought to make money for himself, but always and everywhere his intention was only the betterment of the lives of his countrymen. He did not seek to become famous or wealthy, but fame and great wealth came as a consequence of the work which he did. He never sought it out, but it just followed after him naturally because of his motive of selfless service. He just desired to do something immensely beneficial for the people of his nation. The huge, vast Ford empire came only as a result of his hard work and his tenacity and his sticking to his goal and his dream. Ford becomes the perfect role model for our young people today because he sought always to keep the other first. When keeping the high standards of quality in mind for the construction of his car, it was the safety of the passengers that was paramount in his mind. When introducing the assembly line, it was the convenience and ease of his workers that was what he had in his mind. In deciding to share the profits of his company with his workers, he really wanted to give them a sense of ownership and pride in the work which they were involved in. And finally, in all of his striving to bring the price of his cars down, it was his aim that every American should be able to afford to buy one. Always and in every move that he made, it was the interest of the other which he had in mind. Selfless motivation was at the root of this inventive genius. What an amazing story and what an amazing life. If we could have learned just one thing from this great inspirational man today, it would be that if we would find an idea to work on, the benefits of which would be to others and not to ourselves, then we would have learned something that would add great value to our lives. This would be a surefire recipe for success, not only financial success, but it would bring us great happiness in the pursuit of it as well. For true success and happiness are not measured by our bank balances, but rather by the extent of the impact that we can have upon the lives of others and by the influence that we make upon this world in which we live. We have the power to leave this world different from how we found it. The real question is, will we? The answer to this question depends completely on just one individual. Yes, you.